Biggie was gunned down and killed 6 months after Tupac. No one has ever been charged with his murder. But here's what prosecutors will argue at Keffe D's trial that starts this week, detailed by a homicide detective just after Duane Davis, Keffe D's, arrest.
As we all know, Tupac Shakur was an artist who was signed with Death Row Records. And that Death Row Records and its CEO, Marion Suge Knight, were closely affiliated with the Mob Piru criminal street gangs, and that they had an ongoing feud with the Southside Compton Crips. Duane Davis was the leader and shot caller of the Southside Compton Crips.
Members of both gangs were, say police, at the Tyson fight in the MGM Grand that night. And afterwards, in the lobby, Tupac, Knight, and others spotted Keffe D's nephew, Orlando Anderson, and beat him up.
Little did anyone know that it is this incident right here that would ultimately lead to the retaliatory shooting and death of Tupac Shakur. Duane Davis began to devise a plan to obtain a firearm and retaliate against Suge Knight and Mr. Shakur for what occurred inside the hotel against Mr. Anderson.
Anderson, his uncle Keffe D, and 2 other men allegedly got into a white Cadillac and followed Knight and Tupac, who were in a black BMW en route to a club. Investigators allege it was Anderson who actually pulled the trigger.
Were you involved in any way in the death of Tupac Shakur?
No, I was not involved.
Anderson was shot and killed 8 months after that interview with CNN. Keffe D is the only man who was in that white Cadillac who is still alive. He's now 63. No one says he pulled the trigger, but he was, they say, the shot caller. And under Nevada law, he can still be charged with murder.
Within the first few months of the investigation, our detectives knew most of the information I just briefed you on. However, we never had the necessary evidence to bring this case forward.
His own words, say investigators, were Keffe D's undoing.
Specifically, Duane Davis's own admissions to his involvement in this homicide investigation that he provided to numerous different media outlets.
He described the moment, he says, he handed Anderson, who he calls Lane, a gun while riding in the white Cadillac. It's in audio featured in the documentary Murder Rap, inside the Biggie and Tupac murders.
I gave it to Dre, and Dre was like, no. And Lane's like, dude, fuck, dude.
But in July, Keffe D denied being involved in the killings, telling a Las Vegas news station he wasn't even in Nevada when Tupac was killed. Suge Knight is also still alive, right now serving 28 years for manslaughter in an unrelated case. He's on the prosecution's witness list.
I ain't worried about I ain't
Well, I mean, that's what court's for, right?
Tupac died 6 days after he was shot. And now, nearly 30 years later, Keffe D gets his day in court.
Nick Watt, CNN, Los Angeles.
The long-awaited and much talked about trial for the murder of Tupac Shakur is finally getting underway in a Las Vegas courtroom. Jury selection set to begin this morning in just a bit of time here. Tupac Shakur was killed in a drive-by shooting in Las Vegas nearly 30 years ago at the height of his career. Duane Keffe D. Davis is the only person ever charged in connection with his death. He has pleaded not guilty to 1 count of murder with the use of a deadly weapon. Now, Davis, who was arrested in 2023, is not actually being accused of pulling the trigger. He's not considered the gunman. Rather, prosecutors say he helped orchestrate the shooting, providing the gun to the gunman. Davis, as we mentioned, pleading not guilty now.
So what they got you for, man?
biggest case in Las Vegas history.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Like recent?
September 7th, 1996. I ain't worried about it. I ain't doing shit.
Joining me now, CNN legal analyst and criminal defense attorney Joey Jackson. That is one of the examples, before we get into this, one of the examples is whatever you say to the police can be recorded and used against you if you read your Fifth Amendment rights. But before all that, they can use this if they wanted to, right?
Oh, without question. Sarah, good morning to you. And interestingly enough, in this case, he is the best witness. He is the star witness in the case. Why? Because of the various statements that he's made regarding the case. You know, it's going to turn a lot on this 2008 proffer session that he had with law enforcement. What is a proffer session? You usually go into those and law enforcement asks you questions, prosecutors do, and it doesn't see the light of day. You're given immunity. But in this instance, the argument is that he waived that immunity because he's made so many public statements with regard to his involvement, not only on podcasts and other areas of media. He's written a book with regard to that. And so the defense said, no, we don't want to let this in. But the judge said it can be let in and it will be let in. And it's important, Sarah, because what he said to the police, they're going to argue, prosecutors, that it corroborates his involvement and it corroborates his guilt. And as you noted at the outset, they didn't say he pulled the trigger, but you don't have to establish that, just that you aided, you abetted, you counseled, you encouraged, and that's what they're saying he did here.
And look, the other people who were under suspicion by police, one of whom was his relative, have all passed away. He is the only person sort of left in this scenario who's accused of being there that day and taking part in all this. I do want to ask you about the bigness of this case, because he is not wrong that this is one of the biggest cases ever in Las Vegas, because of who was killed and because of all of the rumors around who was responsible. There was this big feud going on between East and West Coast rappers, and that has just taken on a life of its own. Finding these 12 jurors, especially if they're of a certain age, they would know about this case. How difficult do you think that will be?
So always challenging, but certainly there are mechanisms in place for that. And what are those mechanisms? Remember, Sarah, that you can challenge. They'll probably get, I'm thinking, you need 12 jurors, of course, to sit in the box, but they'll likely get between 4 and 6 alternates in case someone gets sick. So when you're picking a jury, what happens is you're asking them questions. Do you know about the case? Do you have any opinions about the case? Do you know who Tupac was? Did you really admire him as a rapper? Do you think someone should be held accountable, even if the evidence doesn't establish it? You're going to ask all those questions. But when you're actually picking a jury, if a juror says they're biased, you can excuse them. It's called excusing for cause, and that's unlimited. But then there are these other challenges called peremptory challenges, in the weeds a little bit, but each side gets 8 of those, and you could excuse someone for any reason or no reason, as long as it's not predicated upon some type of racial reason, et cetera, for which you're excusing them. And so therefore, yes, of course, it'll be a challenge. I think they could get it done, because the main question is, even if you heard about the case, can you base a decision on the facts and the evidence or the circumstances in the courtroom, not what you read in the paper or saw anywhere else? So it's on, and it starts today.
Lastly, this happened almost 30 years ago. How difficult is it to bring a case like this with the idea that there is a book out there published by the person on trial, and there's a lot of comments, which a lot of people say, well, that's the reason why this has happened in the first place, because Duane Keffe D kept talking about it.
Yeah, so I think it's very challenging, right? I know we're in a day and age, certainly, where there are cold cases, and that's why there's no statute of limitations on murder. You can bring it 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, like here, or even more. And I think from a defense perspective, they're going to argue you don't have a weapon, you don't have the car, ballistics wasn't done on that, there's no forensics, there's no DNA, there are no living witnesses. What are we doing here? But remember, we'll end where we began, the statements of Keffe D. That's what we're doing here, we'll say prosecutors, and if those statements are credited and believed, then the defense has a problem. In the event that that's all they got, which the defense will argue, then that creates another story, perhaps reasonable doubt.
The judge letting it in because he kept talking about it. As people say in the streets, talking smack. And then this ends up being part of his case. It'll be interesting to see if he himself testifies, because in some ways he's already testifying with the words that he has already used in public, right?
Exactly.
There is
he
a
says
lot.
He's not going to testify, but we'll see what happens.
We'll see.
Jury selection begins today for the man charged in Tupac Shakur's 1996 shooting death on the Las Vegas Strip. Now, the prosecution will focus on his 2019 memoir, where they say Davis implicated himself. Davis has pleaded not guilty, and legal experts have said that his defense may try to show that past statements are false.
What he said 30 years ago, got money for war, can't feed the poor. That's still relevant. That's still active, relevant, current statement today, you know, and he has a lot of wisdom in his music.
It's been nearly 30 years since the murder of one of the most influential artists in history, and we're still asking who killed Tupac. Today, jury selection begins in the trial against the only person ever charged in his death. Duane Davis, who goes by the name Keffe D. He's not accused of pulling the trigger, but rather orchestrating the whole thing. Now, he was arrested back in 2023. Tupac Shakur was killed in a drive-by shooting near the Las Vegas Strip on September 7th, 1996. And Davis is one of the only people still alive who was at the scene of the crime, the other person being Suge Knight. And he's serving a 28-year prison sentence in another case. So today, that moment in history returns to the spotlight.
So what they got you for, man?
Biggest case in Las Vegas history.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Like recent?
September 7th, 1996. I ain't worried about it. I ain't care.
So joining me now, former federal prosecutor Elise Adamson. Welcome back. Okay, it's been a long time coming because Keffe D's been running his mouth the entire time. I mean, just to be honest, he's been very candid about what has happened. I want to play an example from when he was talking about this publicly.
You said the shots came from the back. Big Dre, Orlando. Who shot Tupac?
They keep it for the code of the streets. It just came from the back seat, bro. Hanging out the window like he was in a parade.
Tupac.
Yeah, he was.
So what happens next?
And we just came, and I ain't gonna go into the details like that, you know what I'm saying? But, you know, you got it in a book.
He wrote a book, and then he said a ghostwriter wrote the book, and so he distanced himself from comments there. Is all of this just going to come up in the trial? Like, can they build a timeline based on everything he said publicly?
Oh, Audie, absolutely. This entire trial is brought compliments of the defendant himself, Mr. Davis, because had he not run his mouth, as you just said, and wrote a book and gone on all of these podcasts, the government wouldn't have enough evidence in this case. This entire case, the linchpin of this case, is the defendant's own confession, which was what makes this so interesting, because the prosecution essentially has to prove to the jury that Mr. Davis can be believed, that everything he said can be corroborated, because they really don't have anything else at this point.
One of the things they talked about was him speaking to investigators in, quote, a proffer. You'll probably explain what that is, back in 2008. And in the interview, he said Tupac had assaulted his nephew. And so that Davis says he got his nephew a gun, who then went on to shoot Tupac. And so